the theme that I'm picking up, the successes that we see tend not to be actual flashes in the pan. There's a lot that goes into it. And this is something any founder of any studio, any company of any kind will tell you. Like, I didn't get here by, last month I decided I was going to do something, and then this month, oh my gosh, I'm a billionaire. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but if you're, for me, that's almost the creative auteur model of a video game like design philosophy, where it's, well, what we need the one person who has got the whole game in their head, and we're just going to have people try to pull it out of their head and then build all the pieces, and then when it's all going to come together perfectly, and then we're going to ship it, and it's going to be the biggest game of all time. I'm like,
Peter Molyneux is making another one.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, there are people like that, that you can point to, Nintendo, Sid Meier, like there's people and companies that seem to, from the outside at least, seem to pull this off. And I would just say you're taking like a long odds bet in games, and you're making it a way longer odds bet by doing that. And instead, you have what you guys are talking about, which is start small, build small. And it's interesting how this actually aligns with a lot of the things that I talk about on the development side, right? Don't rush to production. Just keep your team size as small as you can. Like, burn rate's a big deal. The smaller you are, the easier it is to pivot. That's not just we're not burning as much money. It's also, if I've got 150 people in a studio and I decide, like, we need to pivot the game, now that takes months. If you were 15 people and you want to pivot the game, it's like, well, that takes a week, right? And it's going to be an obnoxious week, but it's way better than the months you're going to spend trying to get 150 people going on a new vision, assuming you can even get through all the checks and balances that you've already built for yourself, even at that relatively small scale, to try to make sure you don't do anything stupid, right? Like, and so you have this, like, stay small, test early, try things, and your philosophy around the marketing and the community is like, just get it rolling. Like, go with it now, go with it before you're ready. If you're a AAA studio, you don't have that privilege because there is a player expectation that you have to contend with. But if you can, do that. And I want to come back to Odyssey Interactive, because I think it's an interesting example to me. I can't say for sure whether Odyssey Interactive is going to be successful or not with their next game or the one after that or the one, I don't know. And I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep getting funding, and that depends on a million factors and all this different stuff, right? Like, there's macroeconomic stuff that impacts that a lot. I will say that what you were describing about how they were approaching their next game, they seem like somebody who's trying to stack the deck in their favor. And so if we were to say something like, hey, this is a low odds game dev, like, there were, I don't know, I think there were 14,000 Steam games, and who knows how many different things that on other platforms, like, let's say there's 100,000 different things people can play that came out in the last year, 18 months, whatever it was, which is not an unreasonably high number, I don't think. No, yeah, and more, like, that number is growing. Your odds of making money are low. This is about stacking the deck in your favor and figuring out when you're not going the right direction as fast as possible. And I appreciate that you guys are both talking about that, but it's like you want to meld the development side of the organization that's trying to stay light, pivot fast, like, be flexible, empower people to make calls and do stuff, and with a marketing team that's the same way. And we all recognize that, like, hey, when you're, a week from launch, it's all planned out, right? By then, you're done, pencils down, it's going to happen now. You will reach that point. Yeah, exactly. But you have a lot more space before that on the development side, and it sounds like also on the marketing side, to actually learn and play and tinker and try stuff, and do it in a way that's more cost effective than these gigantic efforts that, you didn't test it, so it just blew up in your face.
Oh yeah, like, I remember a little while ago we were kind of trying to start like an indie publisher, so we talked to a lot of VCs and advisors in that space, and one of the pieces of feedback that we got was it's hard to invest in marketing because you never get that money back, right? If you invest in a game studio and the game flops, it's like, well, there's 20 to 50 people that just learned a lot about how to make a game together, right? Whereas with marketing, it's like, okay, well, you just set $500,000 on fire in Facebook ads and, like, nothing worked, right? And I think some of the way that we kind of view the world is applying that thinking to saying, like, okay, well, how do you build institutional knowledge on how to market yourself, right? How do you do things that don't scale initially to prove a concept? then say, okay, yeah, we should go pour money in this, right? And I think what's funny is you kind of make the distinction between the development and publishing side. Like, I've always kind of felt that line should be a lot blurrier than it typically is at a studio. Yeah, just because like I think like honestly, like I think especially in pre-production and early production, marketing and products should be talking a lot, right? Because marketing, especially if they're doing community right, they're going to be out there saying, hey, this thing you're talking about, this is what people are saying, right? This is how I need to talk about it. What do you think about that? Are we capturing the experience that your vision is leading toward? Or are we talking about the now? We should be talking about the future, or vice versa. Or it's like, hey, like we want to do a trailer that's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to take 6 months. What do we have now that we can start working on? Like, how do we actually deliver on that at a high fidelity of the things that we want to say, we want to talk about? Because unfortunately, like a lot of the marketing side it's not as iterative, it's not as agile as it looks like on the dev side, right? Like we can move in sprints, but it doesn't really work that way. It's kind of very more project oriented with deadlines and stuff like that. Just because the nature of the work is more delivery focused than it is discovery focused, right? But finding ways to kind of get those two sides to be working in lockstep and making sure the information is flowing in a really meaningful way. I think that's what really unlocks marketing to be as successful as it can be, is in situations like that. And like we've all worked at places that have that and places that don't. It feels different. It feels adversarial at times. That's gross, you know?
It's interesting when you get to a place and you know, we all share Riot in our background, where I almost viewed marketing not as, oh, that's somebody else over there on the publisher. It was just like, this is just another discipline. Like we've got QA, we've got marketing, we've got, you know, and that I didn't realize until far into my time at Riot, like, oh, this is abnormal. Like this is not, like there's very much can be this us versus them. And there's like, well, there's the publishing side stuff and then there's the studio side stuff. Like we develop the game and we're the experts about the games and making them and all, but the publishers are the experts and everybody thinks we're all the most important. And it's like, no, we're the problem with games is that everybody needs to hit a home run at the same time and you might make your money back, right? Like that's how this works. And it's not actually a bunch of individual home runs. It has to be a team thing. I think like a soccer or rugby is a better analogy for that, because like it's not you going out, it's you going out with everybody else. Chris, go ahead.
This is why the publisher and AAA kind of model is pretty busted. Like the old school publisher model is publishers are making a bunch of bets. So are VCs, but they're not doing any of the work. They're not on the team. They're the man. They're just they're Steve Ballmer or whatever, right?
Right.
They're just the money guys. And that might be unfair to Steve Ballmer. Maybe does he own the Clippers or whatever? Anyway, point is, the old school publisher model is adversarial to some extent. The last part of the Helldivers story is after that they also had this issue with balance, where the way the balance team was making decisions was alienating a large vocal cohort of the player audience. I don't know how much that actually impacts churn and like any kind of fall off or whatever. Who knows? Like that's multivariable calculus. It's above my pay grade. But like it was a sentiment. It was a brand risk and a brand damage that they didn't have great communication around balance. And maybe to some extent, like good. And you look at them now. They're now walking back a lot. They're doing a lot of buffs. They're changing their actual design approach to land stuff better with players. It's a tightrope, but like having that like development, publishing, working as a team, standing side by side, and like being in close alignment, like product marketing alignment, not just product market fit, is like so crucial. And it's very crucial for live games. I think it's just as crucial for like, and probably more important for games that are coming from zero and trying to build an audience in this cacophonous market. So like figuring out like marketing, having a marketing person who's on your team early to help you figure this stuff out side by side is so valuable.
The controversial decisions like that are coming down. A good thing you can do to look smart is to make friends with a research team and just say, hey, can we focus group this before we do a huge announcement, right? Like at Riot, this was definitely earlier days. We had just brought on the research team, and there was basically a plan. Like we wanted to do like the seasonal sets of champions. So like, hey, like we're coming up on 100 champions. That's just the cognitive load is too high. What if we made seasons of 30 champions and ranked, right? And so my boss, like fucking brilliant guy, was just like, not just because of this, but he was like, hey, let's do some research to see if we should, because we were kind of at loggerheads. Because like me, the community guy, I'm like, this is going to be bad, right? And the designer, she was like, no, we totally need to do this. And so it was kind of like a good tiebreaker on something that could be controversial and could be messaged away, but really should we? And in doing that, we all sat there and watched people talk about it. And we kind of just, we reached a mutual conclusion that, yeah, we could do this, but players aren't seeing the problem yet, right? So it's like, let's put this on hold for now. And what's cool about that too is like everybody can kind of walk away happy. Now, I don't know if you can do that when Sony's breathing down your neck saying accounts must merge because, like our stock
Contracts.
Sony and Arrowhead are not side by side on the same team. They're adversarial is the wrong word, but they are not. They have misaligned interests to some extent, and that creates these scenarios.
And this gets into this idea of like aligned incentives, right? Everything I get hit on LinkedIn all the time because I have the title like founder, and so there's a million people who want to help me find leads and all this.
Oh my
stuff.
God, yeah.
And I'm always pinging out to them. Not always. Sometimes I ping out if I'm like, hey, this seemed particularly promising, or you hit me in a unique spot, but I'm still not going to buy your thing. I'm going to ask you, can we align incentives? Is there any way that we can make it so that if I win, you win, and if you win, I win, right? Can we set that up? And if you're like, no, we just trust our stuff so much, you're going to pay us a bunch of money. If it doesn't work, oh, well, that's on you. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound great for me. Maybe I suck, and I want you to shoulder the risk of that as the person that's going to be doing my marketing or lead gen or whatever it is, as much as I am, because I'm in this with you, and I might put in massive effort and just be down thousands of dollars and have not even learned very much. And so this idea of aligned incentives, like at a much larger scale, I see that between these publishers and the studios. And I also think we've probably all seen companies where either on the publisher side or on the studio side, it's almost like we're not allowed to talk. There is a divide there, and that is even worse for this idea of trying to align incentives, right? I can't even go over there and say like, hey, I think that ad that you're thinking about running, I think we could tweak it and make it a lot better based on some things we've changed on the game side, right? Because that might give a false impression, and I think this actually would be more appealing to our audience and blah, blah, like whatever it is. Again, these little things, and I think everybody sort of sits back in their expertise in those environments and just goes like, well, my job is to be the best at this. I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to give any feedback to anybody else. I'm not really going to collaborate with the people that are building this or the people that are marketing this from the other direction. Well, what do you expect to have happen? Of course you're going to go in different directions, right? Like you said, you're fundamentally, you're not aligned, and no one's taking care of that. And that's the joke I'd always say at Riot is they always hired me to come in and fix process, because there was like the process is broken and the team's busted. Can you come in and fix the process? We need like run the meetings better or fix the stand up or whatever. And I'd always go in and I'd say, cool, give me a couple weeks. I want to talk to everybody. And then I'd discover like, hey, your product owner wants to go north. Your team wants to go south. The players think you're going east, and your stakeholders want to go west. We should pick one. And I'm not going to tell you which one is right. There's somebody here, probably between the stakeholders and the product owner, with hopefully a healthy dose of player, is going to decide like, well, this is where we should go. And what do you know? When everybody was going the same direction, suddenly the process problems weren't a problem, because what we were actually trying to do is use process to enforce compliance to a way of operating, to a particular goal. And I think that happens between publishers and studios as well. I'm going to use the contract that we have, the way that this is set up, to try to enforce your compliance to an idea, because we're fundamentally going in different directions. And, sometimes it's like 5 degrees and sometimes it's 180. But if you're going in different directions, you're just going to have a bad time. So one thing I'm going to ask, I'm not an expert in community. I'm not an expert in marketing. What should I have asked you that I didn't about this that would help leaders in game dev today? Or what's something you would like to say to leaders in game dev? What would help them succeed?
I think we said our usual piece. Like our mantra is really about that getting signal early, testing early, marketing your game sooner than you might be comfortable otherwise, and not being so scared of your own shadow and so worried about first impressions, etc. Like start earlier than you possibly think you should. I think probably there are probably a lot of practical. I think what most developers would start with, studio like leadership, whatever, is some sort of very practical, very very tactical question around like, how do we get content creators to stream our game, or how do I run a play test? Do I do it on Steam? Do I do it like this way? And like, there's a lot of those kinds of practical questions that I think would actually be the questions they would ask. That's the kind of questions we get all the time. And so we could dive into some of those, but I think like all those questions ladder up to a fundamental kind of like, okay, what are we trying to solve here? We are trying to make a great game, and a great game is a great marketable game. And so how are we going to validate that this game is marketable, and how are we going to market it? Like, the only way to find out if it's marketable is to market it. And so figuring out the right way for your game and your context, your budget, your scenario to do that is what you should be thinking about before you raise money, frankly. Like you should be thinking about, as a member of your founding team, if not advisors, like, think about, how do we bring this thing to market as quickly as possible, especially in this funding environment, which who knows how long it's going to be this way. I don't know. I don't know if it's survived till 25. I think it's go get revenue. And the way to do that is well, you know, like, how did you frame it, Ben? Like, you have to, everybody on the team has to hit a home run at the same time, and then maybe you've got a shot. But like, it also means that you've got whatever runway you have, you need to get signal that your game is going to be a going affair, whether or not that's revenue or whether that's like, we've got this kind of traction. Traction is really, really hard to get. And you are waiting way too long to start getting it, most likely. So that's kind of like that's what I would typically leave folks with.
Yeah, I mean, so I say this with the caveat that you're not working on a sequel, you don't have Marvel as your IP, and your marketing budget is, let's just say, under 8 figures, right? What I would say is start earlier than you think for marketing. Every time you talk publicly about what you're doing is another chance to earn a fan. And the more people that you get on your side early are the people that are going to follow you along and will basically reward you in the long run, because ultimately, like, those are the people that are going to go tell all their friends that whatever you're making is the best thing since sliced bread, and you have to play it. You have to. The other bit is in working alongside that, talked a lot about shots on goal. Try different ones. Try stuff that doesn't make sense, okay? Because, like, the thing is, we say, okay, you're going to need creators, you're going to need or influencers, whatever you call it. You're going to need content marketing. You're going to need Steam. You're going to need, like, some sort of publisher, like, whatever that looks like, right? That is all stuff that is very much foundational and can take you into the stratosphere. But you also need to figure out what about your game specifically is the selling point. Like, what's the hook? And what's that thing that you all need to rally behind? And you might know it and you might get it right just because you're making an awesome game. The team totally gets what's happening and it's just working. But every time you're out there talking to a player or talking to multiple players, they're going to tell you what you should be talking about, right? If they like some aspect of the game that you don't think is really that big of a deal, it is a big deal because you just have people say it is, right? So listen to them and let them tell you how you should market in certain environments, right? And then also, like, try it. If it works, great, cool. You just found your hook, and if it doesn't, okay, well, there's a mismatch here, right? But yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of goes back to experiment early. Don't build things around a tool. It's just like, try stuff that you may not be able to scale in the long run. Just especially in that first like early gestational phase, this is the time that everything's cheap. Try as much as you can. So when it's time to really start spending money, you know where to put it.
Nice, love it. Okay. If people want to find out more about either of you, both of you, where should they go?
ignitionfacility.com, or find us on LinkedIn. We've been, like, it's a good problem to have. We've been busy with, like, client work and heads down on some stuff, especially the kind of client work we like, which is like, we like to be pretty embedded. Like, we want to be, there's kind of like two poles to, like, the way we like to work with studios is, like, either we can be consultants and we can kind of give you, answer your question on a kind of consistent basis, give you, like, our take and our strategy and some evidence, and then you can go execute, and we probably have the right contacts to help you execute if you want to, like, hire your own community manager or bring on an agency that specializes in content creators or whatever. But we also like to work with teams where we're, like, almost like part, like an extension of their team. Like, we were doing that with a couple teams right now, and it's really satisfying. It's just also, like, a ton of work. So yeah, find us on LinkedIn, ignitionfacility.com.
Yep, cool. All right. That's awesome. Thank you both so much. I think this has been really insightful. I've appreciated it. You guys have been doing this for a while, and yeah, if you haven't, check them out. If you need help on this, ask them some questions. They're very nice people, and they also are sharp about where things are going. So, okay, thank you both. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. Cheers.